so, hi, Hillary Sammons. Fortunately, I thought the program was a little bit misleading. It just had my picture versus this illustrious team that I'm with, so the fact that you're all here thinking you're just getting me, we're going to change that up. So this is more better. I'm from Rhode Island, the more better learning, and that's how we say more better in Rhode Island. We also say youth. We don't say youth, we say youth. The reality is we are going to only be more better if we listen to the youths. So we've got youth leaders and parent organizers here to get practical about how do we shift the strategy? How do we change it up? And I was explaining to some of them because they missed yesterday. I feel like it's been 2 or 3 days we've been here. But the intense inflection point I think we're at is how is it we do engage our families, our communities, and particularly listen to our youth activists? Because I consider youth our customers. If we're really designing a learning environment for them, we really need to understand how they learn, what they want to learn, and what environment, learning environments, they need to thrive in this modern era. So I think we all, if I've explained to them, most of us in this room, I think all of us, 200% of us in this room really believe that, but figuring how we practically engage our youth and parent and community activists to shift the dynamic that needs to be shifted in our society, we will fail. So this is heavy on you all, and it's going to be less about me. Providence After School Alliance, many of you know, it's a coalition of after-school providers that have public and private were working together for 15 years. And I can honestly say some of my frustration about our work is because the activism of parents and youth and community really hasn't shifted what's dysfunctional in our system, particularly in our schools. In the news today and this week, Providence is really struggling with what to do. Should it hire another superintendent, or should it reconfigure its design? And I think this is the inflection point in our community to really think about what have we learned from our community, our parents and our youth, and how do we actually make for a redesign of our school system that really is about you all. So whether it's East Coast or West Coast, this system struggle is really happening. I promise to just get this conversation going. I will not promise that I will try hard not to swear. I know that I was put up here because I'm famous for dropping the F-bombs. And I know Karen figured that might be a way to wake you up in the morning if Hillary starts cussing up there. And Larry's putting a pool together to bet on how many times I say something inappropriate. And there's numbers up here that are probably telling me how badly I'm doing. So I've promised my new friends here that I am a disruptor, but I'll try not to swear. But when I do swear, I was thinking about this last night. Why do I swear so much? It's because when I get frustrated and passionate about the dysfunction and what doesn't work and why we're stuck, I drop huge F-bombs. And I know I shouldn't be doing it. I'm over 60, but so I told them that I'm not going to be frustrated when they tell me their real stories and they talk and give us clues on how to shift it and how to embrace them. So I'll be less inclined to swear, but when there's a bunch of old farts like me up here who can't handle change, then I start cussing. But I've got young innovators here, so I'm going to be super well behaved. So enough about me. I want you to meet John from Tacoma. Woo! Tarika from Seattle. And Hikma from Seattle as well. And these two, they know each other a little bit. By the end of this conversation, they're going to be forming a whole new organization and changing the world. So really, I want to hear your stories about, each one of you is going to tell a little bit of story about how you are at this leadership point. How'd you get here? And that what we want to do is explore, what are you trying to change? What's your vision? And then what is it that we need to do to bust things up a little bit? So are you okay if we start with you, Hikma?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Let's start.
Silent but dangerous. We were having a conversation. She sat there quietly. I'm going to start with her because I think she's got a lot to say.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hikma Shirka. I guess how I got to this point starts with where I was born and raised. So I was born and raised in Ethiopia. I moved to the United States in 2008. And our community center here is primarily led by young people. my generation is kind of the first generation that is growing up here. So we're more connected to the American culture and I guess systems more than our parents are. And so a lot of the young people lead our community. We do events all the time for youth and adults. And so growing up in that community, I saw how powerful young people can be. I feel like I saw young people at their finest, like they were provided with opportunities to do whatever, and we chose to support our communities in whatever ways we can. And so for me, coming from that environment and seeing how powerful young people can be, to graduating and then from high school and like going into kind of the workforce, and seeing adults sit at a table and make decisions that affected young people but had no young people at that table would really frustrate me. And then when I would say something, they'd be like, okay, well, you should join this. And then I would join, and I'm like, I'm the only young person here. And this is not a space young people should be in, well, in terms of how the environment was set up. But this is a table that young people should be sitting at. And young people deserve to be making decisions that were affecting their day-to-day lives. I feel like there were a lot of old people making decisions about my life, and I had no say. And for me to see like how much power young people had, and for us to just waste that like would frustrate me. So I guess that's how I got into this world, and my passions were and still are having young people at decision-making tables and involving young people at every step of the process. Like, don't come to me and ask me what I think of something you've already done. Like, I want to be at every step of that.
Good. We're gonna get this. Is great. Great.
All right, my name is Tarika Fascion, and I shared a different story with these guys about how I came to this, and I think I have to move it back a little bit further. After I graduated high school, I started teaching at a high school in La Puente, California, and it was all at-risk youth. And I don't know if you guys, you know the research. You should not put a new teacher in a classroom with youth who have been labeled at risk. And so one of the things that, I think the only thing that really saved me through that whole experience was that I really believed in them as people. And like I said, as a young person myself, like I was literally like 22 with these 14 and 15-year-olds, so we were almost peers, is that I really believed in the dignity of who they were. Now, like I said, my teaching skills were not on point really at all, because I was still in the process of being trained myself. But they put me with a team teacher, and they would be in my class, and then they would go to the next class because they were in a cohort fashion, and I would hear cussing, I would hear desk throwing, I'm like, guys, can you let me know what's going on? Like, why can't we seem to leave the furniture where it belongs, you know? And so at the time, like, my last name was Holmes. I taught in a predominantly Latino community, so, you know, they would say, you know, hey, Holmes, we know you care about us. You know, they don't believe in us, Miss Holmes. They don't, you know, and so my biggest thing was, I don't care who didn't believe in you to this point. I need you guys to understand who you are and why you are. So I had a chance to go to a training, and that training exposed me to this whole concept of understanding personality, and that was just one layer. But there was something about them understanding that whether their parents believe, whether fellow educators believe, that they had a purpose in this life. And that was my mission. Like I said, naive as it was at the time, just like, we just have to believe, you know, but that started me on this journey of really wanting them to understand who they were. And I can honestly say I was not necessarily a parent advocate until I became a parent. Then I was like, oh, this is why we should honor parents as well on this journey. So I just, so just through it all, like my biggest thing and my passion right now is to simply say, you know, many students are expected to learn the same, perform the same, produce the same, and in fact, they're not the same. So even when we're talking about equity, if I have a student over here who has a brilliant engineering mind, they may not need the same equipment or the same resources as someone who is this amazing artist who just needs a nice, cool charcoal set and specialty paper to get their shine out, or to get their identity out. So it is my personal mission to see parents understand who their kids are and why they are and how they learn best, so they can advocate from a place of strength. But not just the parents. I want the teachers to know, and I want the student to know. So when they are in these spaces and places and everyone is kind of like, you know, they're not, participating up to, expectations. Well, up to whom's expectations? Like I said, if I can build a computer I had a student who could build a computer in record time, could hack your computer, could change their grades. I'm not advocating that. I'm not advocating that at all. But what I'm saying is, if that's never measured in school and they're never being celebrated for how they shine, can you imagine going into school day in and day out and the core of who you are never being celebrated? That to me is a great tragedy. So my mission personally, tangibly, is for every parent, every child, every educator to know their students' power traits, and it's beyond modality. We know that some learn by moving and doing and things of that nature, but what is their disposition? Not if they're smart, but how are they smart? I don't know about you guys, but I can be told, oh, you're smart, and I'm just like, actually, I can't read a GPS. I didn't know how to get here. Like, I got turned around the block. So I need to know how I'm smart so you can validate specifically what it is you're seeing in me so that that thing can be given life and can be nourished or whatever. And the thing is, we're not all apple trees. So if you're going to give me the same thing that you're going to give Hikma, I don't need the same thing that Hikma needs. So even when we're looking at equity, like, I still need you to see me for the individual that I am so that that thing can be nurtured and celebrated. So in a nutshell, that is my passion.
That's,
yes, sir.
Woo!
Hello, everybody. My name is John Levi from Tacoma.
He's like, Tacoma?
Yeah, we out here.
Tacoma team here.
How did I get to this work? I went to Evergreen State College down in Olympia, and I was working down in the Capitol, House of Representatives, working in the Senate, and I enjoy politics. I enjoy just debates and thinking and theories and all that good stuff. And I thought, hey, this could be a good way to impact, make some change. And so I worked at the Capitol, and I was like, okay, wow, that's a good experience. But I realized that wasn't where I was supposed to be. I went to a fundraiser, and somebody from Communities and Schools of Tacoma was there and said, hey, what do you do? And I said, I just graduated from college. I need a job. She said, well, come out to one of the schools. I think you'd be good for it. And I went out there, and I started a week later. So, it's been about 12 years now that I've been working in the community and working with youth and families. And I really enjoyed the connection and the relationship that you can build, especially around programs and schools and communities. But I saw one thing that bothered me, and it was how the adults sometimes perceived certain children. And, I just observed it and kind of thought nothing of it, but then I kept seeing it and kept seeing it and kept seeing it. And then I noticed that this was a theme. This was kind of something that was within the culture. Obviously, it's historical. Obviously, it has its roots from where it has its roots from. But I said, why are we still here, in this day and age, treating children this way? When we say that we're about education, we're about learning, we're about creating these safe spaces. So I think from that moment, my mind kind of shifted to more of kind of that activist energy, but very peaceful in a way. But I think, I can be a vehicle to speak some certain truth. Being a young black man, I think I have a voice that a lot of people do not have within the school system. It's a perspective that I bring that that needs to be highlighted a little bit more. So my work here is truly from the heart, and I love people and I love families, and I think that's kind of why I'm at this point.
Tell me a little bit, awesome. If they're not on your boards, they should be out here in Tacoma and Seattle. I'd scoop you up in a minute. Tell us how, because I heard you say, Hikma, not being at the table. How do you get the youth and the parents at the table, and maybe give us a sense of, in Seattle and Tacoma, where are youth at the table, and how's it going? Or not?
Yeah.
How do we make that? I think the reality is we want to understand what might be happening, what are the opportunities to mobilize and get more youth and parents at the table. So what's happening, what should be happening?
It's an interesting question, because I feel like a lot of, at least from the conversations I've had yesterday and with the people that I work with, I feel like everyone's like, where are the young people? How can we get young people together? And you all know where the young people are at. Like, you don't need somebody to tell you, you serve young people, that those are the young people that you should be getting organized. I feel like we always look for a specific type of young person to engage, so we want that ideal. So I think somebody's, actually, no, I'm not going to use that term that they use, but yesterday someone was talking about the type of young person that we always reach out to. And it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be the person that'll show up to every single meeting. It doesn't have to be the person that'll take notes and ask questions and things like that. There are levels of engagement when it comes to young people or parents, whoever it is. I mean, even with parent engagement, like we there are parents who work 2-3 jobs to support their families. They can't show up to every board meeting, but that doesn't mean these parents don't have something to say, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't allow them to have a say. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, I think what you're getting, I feel like what you're getting at, and I would like to tease this out, is we often go out and it's called creaming. We get the best, and we get them to come to our tables
Yes.
versus going out to their table. So it's how we set the table in a way. And so, as you say, we know where families and parents are, and we should, if we're in this business, have a real sense of the struggle, particularly of families in poverty, what their schedules and daily lives are like. But how to reach them and include them seems to be part of the challenge, because when you're getting only those who are coming to our, the structural elite tables, you're not necessarily tapping all the voices. So how is it that you are doing that? I mean, you were telling me a little bit about you're going out and training parents,
Right.
Tarika. So how does what's happening in your communities and through your activism that's going out and engaging? And because I think people in the room really need the concrete guidance and advice on how best to do this and mobilize their own communities.
So I think for me, what I've been doing is partnering with nonprofits and serving in these different teams. And so the cool thing is, because I'm really, you may not be able to tell, but I'm introverted by nature. But there's people who know that I am about this work. So there's nonprofits I know who are serving certain groups of families. And as a part of their structure within their organization, they have these parent components, these trainings to empower them just in case they don't, say, make it in sports. So some of the organizations that I'm partnering with, a sports organization, so they have these parent to player engagements. And so I go into those settings and I do workshops and trainings, because my biggest thing is they already have the parents and the kids, but the beautiful thing about that and the challenging thing about that is that as you're doing these workshops, you have you're teaching on power traits, and you're helping them understand, these 5 aspects of who they are. And the youth are literally looking at their parents like, are you listening? Because it's really interesting, because a lot of times we'll say that, students who come from a lower socioeconomic status struggle, but I'm also finding that parents who are of wealthier means are also a challenge, because they already have their kids' journey mapped out and what they plan to pay for and what schools they will send them to. So I just see a lot of pain in kids' eyes when it's like, I need you to see me for who I am. Like, I didn't just wake up one day and decide to become this. You see that little 2-year-old and you have one that's all precocious and climbing over everything and moving and talking and whatever, and then you see the one that's more quiet. Like, the seed of who they are is already in place. So how do we begin to honor that? So for me, I'm just saying, I am available to do these trainings, workshops online. I don't care how it happens, but I really do believe that every parent and every child should know how they're wired, so they can know how to lean in and how they learn. And like I said, just beyond modality, because the thing is, I can have these modalities, I can have these innate talents, but if I'm not interested, I'm still going to shut down and not really care about what it is you're teaching at the moment. You let some of these kids loose on YouTube or slime videos, and oh my gosh, they're just like taking notes and all of these things. And so how do all those things come together to make up the mix of who they are? You know what I mean? Like I said, you have a lot of kids who are very talented in a lot of areas, and we're like, you should live up to your potential. But I don't want to play football, Dad.
Who's coming to you, though? If you're a life force. If you were in my community and I was reading Jonathan's book about the Sacramento schools, and he was, where if you're here, Jonathan, wow, was going out, met with a Hmong community group. Who are your leaders coming out to you to listen to you? Because it seems like your assets that should be happening. Is that happening to you, John? And then back to you. It's like
Yeah, I think when families and young people know that somebody genuinely cares, they're going to show up just on the strength of that. So, we can get all fancy, but it's still old school. You call people, you talk to people in person, you invite them out. If you offer some food, they may come if their schedules permit. So, there's really no magic wand to it. It's persistence, right? If you want young people at the table, if you want parents and families at the table, you have to call them, you have to talk to them, You can't just send an email and say, I did it. You have to make contact with people. We're real people. We're living in a digital age, but we still love human connection. And then what are you asking them to do? What are they showing up for? Too many times a lot of communities, get promised things, right? People come in and they do all these participatory stuff. They extract what they need and then they leave. So how do you create an environment where when people show up, like something real is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like structurally, there's this game that's played. The politicians knock on your door, and if they're good, and they're gonna,
Right.
and then supposedly talk to you, but like
Right.
holding them hostage to sort of say, well, we'll maybe support you, but you better come back.
Right.
And this can't be just a one-time conversation. And then the other thing that happens structurally is almost every grant requires that you do this community planning process. Oftentimes grants require you to do a 6-month community planning process and then you get the implementation grant. Well, then you know, the community-based organizations or the government agencies come out and they mobilize all these parent and youth teams. And then the money comes and they're like, you're sitting there going, well, are we still involved in this thing? What happened?
Right.
How do we actively hold some of the leaders hostage to sticking with you?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's difficult. I think that's where you need people at the higher level that will hold those people in higher levels accountable. If we're still having this conversation of how do we the people, hold the people with the power accountable,
maybe the power structure isn't working. Yeah.
I do want to add on though, I feel like when it comes to engaging young people or even parents, we act like it's so difficult. It's not rocket science. It's just it's literally like building relationship as you would with a friend. And you don't have to start with 20 young people out of nowhere. You start with 2 and build a relationship with those 2 and engage those 2 in an authentic way. And then maybe double that. And then it expands, you know, it keeps going. But like, we don't have to make it so complicated. It's just literally talk to young people the way you would want other people to talk to you.
Do you have any of these high school redesign efforts happening in your community? I mean, some of them have been, are very grounded in it being a youth-designed venture, and I'm curious to see if that is happening and if those are hotspots of models of what could work.
Yeah, I think like within Tacoma, you know, they've built a few new community centers, and you know they've reached out to the youth and had them design the kitchen and the recording studio and different things of that nature. So youth, you know, they're a part of that process, and it makes them feel really good. And then when they go and they actually see the facility, it's like, wow, you know, I helped design that. So that's happening there. Also in Tacoma, you know, we have a lot of innovative schools, a lot of STEM schools, SAMI, SOTA, IDEA, probably a couple other ones too. So, you know, there is kind of a changing of landscaping as far as what type of schools are out there in Tacoma, and youth are involved in designing those things as well.
And I feel like the students from Parkland have really shifted the gun conversation. And I know they have in our community. I mean, when they've traveled around and spoken, I feel like that's like sort of an example of the activism that has huge potential that we kind of haven't tapped enough. And figuring out how do we do that? How would you like to see that happen in your community more? Because you've got representatives from your community. Push them, challenge us. And what should we be doing in our other communities to activate? Because I do feel there's a lot of, the power structure is fearful of change. There's a lot of happy tweaking that goes on. Right. But in terms of real shift and change, if we aren't mobilizing and pushing, I worry that I don't think I got the marathon blood that Karen has. I'm over 60 and I'm looking at 65 going, yeah, that's when I get on the healthcare thing. And I don't know. I feel like unless you young people ratchet it up, I'll back you up all the way. Yeah. But I'll go to 75 if you guys mobilize. I promise I will. But I am not going to sit around between now and 65 and watch my generation plod along with duct tape, patching and plugging. I mean, I have to tell you, I got a revolutionary blood in me, and I want you guys to rise up. Yeah. Come on, what are you gonna do? Wake me up and keep me going beyond so I can keep the marathon going with Karen, because otherwise, if it's same old, and your troop doesn't, if you don't mobilize out here and then wake us up on the East Coast and we wake you up and we figure it out in the middle, I don't know.
That's why I think it's important to recognize who your tribe is. I think everybody in this room, you have a different mix of strengths and passions and gifts or whatever, and it's really important to lean into that. Like Hikma was saying, like, the youth are not hard to find. You know what I mean? But I'm saying if that's not what you're looking for, then you won't really find them and do the work that's needed once you do find them. So for me, I recognize that I absolutely can and will do youth workshops, but my tribe right now is really those parents, because the thing is, those are the ones who are needing to be on the front lines advocating for their children, but advocating once again from a place of awareness and understanding of who their child is. It's not just about like, don't, keep sending my kid out, or, is there something else we can do? But it's like, if you recognize that those kids who have that spontaneous disposition, who are those movers and shakers and, just have those jokes probably at the most inappropriate times, but they are going somewhere with that in the future, like you can begin to, it's different when you're coming into the office from a place of being empowered versus like, here we go again, and there's little Johnny again. So I think it really is important to recognize, I'm hearing what John is saying, like he's really empowered by the policy side of things. And like I said, we absolutely need people at the table of policy getting those things changed. But it really is important to recognize just what your passion is and what your lane is, because that's the thing that's going to keep you up at night. That's the thing that's going to make you keep working when everyone else is like, okay, been there, done that, tried that, it's time to move on. Like, I can't leave this work behind, because my whole thing is, it's like, do you see them for the seed of who they are? My husband said something to me once. I was like, I was talking about people like, oh, they're special, they're special. He was like, well, Tarika, if everybody's special, is anyone special? If you're not making any distinction, if everybody is monochrome and everybody is the same, then you don't see me, So I think it is important for us to understand, once again, not just for us to understand who they are, but for them to understand who they are and how they learn, so they can even begin to know how to ask for help themselves. Like, right. I know I learn this way. Like, I learn best when I can hear it or watch it through a video. Do you have any resources that you can point me to that will help me get the information in this way? Because now, even adults I find are afraid to ask for help. Like, I don't want to bother anyone. Everyone else is tired and we're overextended. So if we're needing help, like how much more so do they need help in the navigating? And if they do know who they are and how to ask for help, like Hickman is saying, it's like, I don't know, I do believe some of those shifts begin to happen.
Well, this is an interesting point. Where does it feel safe to ask for help in your communities? I mean, so you've got youth that organized, parents organized, community organized. Does the out-of-school time, the school structure, parent associations, where is it that it feels safe to ask for help? I mean, I have to ask my staff sometimes, where do you feel safest to ask help within the organization? Because it's oftentimes not going to be the boss. Mm-hmm. So if we need to ask ourselves, if we are going to take that movement, where do you feel like it's safe? Because there's a lot of people in here that would be safe to ask for help. Knowing how to do it and having the confidence to do it is one thing, but where do you feel in your community it's safe to sort of go, if you were to start to move forward as a group, where are the safe spots?
I mean, I come from youth-led organizations, youth-facilitated groups. So for me, it was always very, especially like seeing that shift between like very youth-led, seeing what young people are doing, and then like adults making decisions about young people's lives, just experiencing both. I was always very uncomfortable with asking for help, especially from adults. So what I'm trying to do right now, working on, is asking for help from adults who have the resources that would support these youth-led things.
And who are they? Are they?
I think they're all in very different places.
Is it organizations or structures, or is it just individual people?
I think it's, for me at least, it's individual people.
For your organization, your youth organization, there's a tendency to go to certain types of people.
Yes.
Are they in what sectors are they in?
In different sectors. I mean, there are people in government, a lot of, I don't know if I would say teachers.
I interrupted you. In government, go ahead, government.
No, there are people that I personally know in government, and a lot of nonprofits, providers that are working like directly with young people. I feel like is where I feel comfortable.
And being listened to, and where you're really listened to. Good.
I'm in the same space with the nonprofits because they've already made a commitment or have a mission and vision that already aligns with what it is I'm also trying to accomplish. So it's that alignment piece is key, you know. But there are a lot of people, like you said, doing the work, but I think sometimes the left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing so that we can partner, so I can let Hickman know, like, hey, I have this, I'm able to do these kinds of things and willing to share that resource and share.
How about with you in
Tacoma?
Well,
in Tacoma, I think is kind of, every place probably thinks it's a special place, but I think Tacoma is really special. You know, with the school district, Whole Child Initiative, you know, it's work with the Wallace Foundation. and schools out Washington and UW and this social emotional push and all this, it's all good stuff. And so I feel like we really have a good community to really bounce ideas off of. You know, if it's around mobilizing, you know, we definitely have partners that we can go to talk about strategies, how to mobilize. If it's around parent engagement, if it's around, you know, making youth feel welcome when they come to the program. We have a really good community in Tacoma that we share tools, tips, and I think it's a very safe space to really, you know, ask questions, to be vulnerable, but ultimately to get some action to move forward. So that's how we do it in Tacoma.
Are your organizations, youth organizations, parent organizations, connecting with each other so that it becomes, instead of cells of energy, sort of a larger organism that's starting to form? And,
Yeah.
and that's not easy to do. I mean,
Right.
I'm part of this thing called the Providence After School Alliance. We work with 50 and 70 organizations. I get asked to come speak all over the country. How do you get everybody to collaborate? Because the nonprofit sector doesn't always collaborate so easily together, particularly in a city like ours that has no money, so everybody's competing for money. But I feel like sometimes that is why change doesn't occur, is because we're not like aligned and like locking arms and pushing
Right.
in as a whole organism.
Right.
How does that, is that something that's
Definitely
happening?
sells.
And
Definitely sells, I think.
and what would it take to make it happen?
I'm waiting for him to share with us what they're doing.
Gotcha. So in Tacoma, I mean, what you really have is, I mean, you have grant dollars that have kind of come into, you know, the school district, Greater Tacoma Foundation, and it's really being used as the catalyst to partner with community partners. Now, these are individuals who have their own programs, whether that be skateboarding, whether that be playing chess, whether it be a reading club. So they're partnering with individuals who have their own companies. They're partnering with nonprofits like Boys and Girls Club, Metro Parks, Tacoma Urban League. And what they're doing is really, they're extending these people on the ground that are doing the work. They're giving them now an avenue to get into the school, whether that's before school, during school, or after school. And they're providing a little bit of stipend. But then it's backed with the strategies of social and emotional. So, you know, building that cell model, you know, that can hopefully turn into like a really nice nucleus is really what we're doing in Tacoma. Getting the schools on board with allowing partners into their school, right? Because, you know, some schools, principals, you know, leaders, their school is kind of like, this is my school, right?
Right,
you know,
right.
I've gone
It's
to a
amazing.
few schools
You're
where it's
turfy.
like, whoa, you know, it does not feel welcoming. So with the initiative that we have in Tacoma, you know, part of it is to push the schools to, you know, open their doors a little bit more to the community, right? So that school can become a community school.
Yeah, opening these doors is the key thing.
Yeah.
How about you? Did you?
I don't know, because with the organization Opportunities United, it's a national movement, and we have like a pod here in Seattle, but it's youth-led, and we have trying to partner with other organizations that are organizing like parents or even providers and other groups, but it's been very difficult because I don't know if at least Seattle is ready to have young people leading the work right now. We're definitely moving towards it, and I've seen it a shift in the past few years, but right now I think there has to be a conversation about what does it mean to have young people at the table, because I feel like youth voice has become such a cute thing. Like everyone wants youth voice, just check it off the list. We have young people on the board, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? So for the young people, are the young people prepared to be in spaces like this, in spaces with adults who have no idea what these young people are going through, but have so much knowledge about the data and the structures and the systems that these young people are functioning in? And so that's one part of it. And then there's the other aspect, like, are adults ready to have young people at the
Very good.
table?
Very
and
good.
adults need training on how to communicate in a room where there are young people. Like, you cannot use a whole bunch of abbreviations and expect the young people to understand what you're talking about and actually have a say in that conversation. So I don't know if we're ready for it, but I think we're moving towards it.
That's exciting to hear. Yeah, John, you have to build on
To add to that, it'd be the equivalent of, so you're saying, you know, are they ready for it, right? I went to Evergreen, and their school model was completely different than what I was used to. There was no test, and there were no grades. it was kind of this evaluation system. But one thing that was really cool at the end of the semester, we wrote an evaluation of the professor. Did they teach, this is what they said they were going to teach? Did they teach what they said they were going to teach? And did I learn what they hoped I would learn? And there was this conversation with me and my professor about my credits. And so to that point, you know, our adults, is the system ready to be graded by young people?
Yeah, and how much are we open to learning from each other, from different backgrounds, and understand each other? I mean, so much of this is a relationship building and takes time. Yeah. And it's also, I think, fear of what you might learn that means you really are going to have to change your way, because it has been maybe for 20 years or 30 years, you know, not necessarily the right way. So it's hard. So this relationship change piece we've been really talking about for the last, you know, 2 days, is how do we learn from each other, and how do we create space so it's safe to really listen, learn, and think about what change means, and can we accept that change? And that's hard to do in a political structure and power structure, because power and money and control almost by default don't mean learning and changing so much. I mean, we've got this dynamic of this going on. We're all trying to figure out how to unpack that and shift that. And if you aren't informing how we do that, I think it's gonna be same old, same old. So you're figuring out how to push us and yourselves and your community it seems like the pivot point right now. And your guidance on, you know, if the Wallace Foundation, which has been fabulous at funding change and letting it be a combination of knowledge, enough money to make it real, setting some parameters. Priscilla and I took a walk yesterday, and we were talking about these systems building change efforts. If there isn't enough, there's got to be sort of a venture capital juice to get it going, some sort of guidance and parameters so that you all are focusing on something together, but you're shaping the end goal. That dynamic sort of has to take place. But if you were like to be in charge of the Wallace Foundation and/or your city, what would you ask your community to focus on in this learning venture? Give us some direction on, like, how do we, from your point of parents, like, come on, get this right, people, you got it.
So people often joke, like I said, I'm broken records. My biggest thing is foundationally we have to understand, once again, who we are. So I would ask that every child have a power traits assessment and understand who they are, and let that kind of track with them. You know what I mean? It's I just can't emphasize enough. Like, we can definitely teach some of the social emotional learning and, you know, being kind and just kind of those human principles. But the thing is, it's like, if I have what's called a supportive disposition, so they're by nature concerned with fairness, they're concerned with people, they're concerned with how everybody's in the room doing. So when you're asking them to focus and they see a child over here that's hurting, like, they're going to gravitate towards that. So it's like, if I know that that's the case, like, I'm not just, you know, Susie's just being defiant, you know, she just won't, you know, focus or whatever. It's like, I'm at least aware. Once again, it's not saying that there's not systems that we still need to navigate, there's not things that we still need to accomplish, but it's something about when the awareness is happening that there's a greater appreciation for what's going on in the moment. So I know that there's so much work to be done after that process takes place, but I'm saying, for me, that is at least a foundational piece.
Well, I hear that seems like a good ingredient if we identify the assets in our youth and our parents, and in our community and in our structure, and then stuff that isn't working.
I've actually had parents.
Let's change it.
Real quick, I've actually had parents kind of break down in tears because they were finding out about their kid, but then they figured out that, oh, I'm this disposition, this is why this hurts me this way, or this is why I'm catalyzed by this, you know, so it's not just the kids. Anyone
want to offer some advice? And then what we're going to do is turn it to the audience for some questions. I turned down that computerized thing because my staff will laugh. I can barely focus I can't even function with my cell phone. I need to see you all directly and have you ask questions. So if you start lining up, you've got questions, and if any of you, while you're lining up for questions, have got some other directions because you're the head of the Wallace Foundation or you've just been elected mayor, what is it we should do differently?
I think as far as in the school setting, we need to have a more blended model
What kind of model?
Blended, just
Blended
a more
model.
blended model, different modalities, different pedagogies, all within, even under the same roof. I think we need to relax on the prison culture, toe the line, do this, do that, do that. I think we need to allow some breath in the schools for teachers and for students. I mean, teachers are stressed out more than anything, doing good work, but they're stressed. It's the culture, it's the environment. I think we need to cook better food so that, it's like people want to come there and eat. I think we need to hold, so then when family night comes, parents come because it's good food. Very small things, right? It's like, I don't have any earth-shattering things.
Basics.
Yeah, it's the basics. And
Food
I
and
think
love
if we get
and
back to some of the fundamentals of just that human interaction, that love, that care, that kindness, that fun, that joy, we won't be sitting at these conferences all the time.
Yeah, those are good
But they're
core
good.
values
But they're
that we need to focus on. Any ideas for you, Hekma, if you're in charge?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always having the people most affected at the table. So if I were elected mayor, I would want, if there are funding streams that are funding youth programs, I want young people to say, this is what we need. And if it's supporting parent support, parents need to be at the table saying, this is what we need. And it doesn't matter what level of government it's at, or community, or nonprofit board. I feel like when the people that are affected are at the table, then the conversation shifts completely. And it's no longer somebody saying, I know the answers to your problems. It's, we know the answers to our problems. So,
Great.
That's good.
yeah.
Okay, whoa, give it up. So how about some questions or even recommendations or ideas you want to share with this team so that they can build their movement here, and or questions of them of how they're doing it? I know it's morning and your coffee hasn't kicked in. Here we go.
I just messed this up because I wanted to lower it, but first of all, thank you. I so appreciate this panel, and the moderation of it was just exceptional and brought up a lot of the holes and what we're doing well. We are maintaining in, probably 90% of the communities in our country and all of the communities in this state, a 19th century compulsory attendance school calendar year, 180 days, that is crunched into about 9.5 months. That year plans for measurable, observable, cumulative summer learning loss. We plan for disconnect from parents, we plan for disconnect from students, and we ask our wonderful community-based organizations, the programs that are sprouting up everywhere, that all of the people in this room are active in, to stuff their programs, in their enrichment programs, in fixing summer and fixing learning loss, and expecting students to come back in September with all the skills and more that they left with in the summer. So my question to each of the panel members would be, what do they think, or within your circles, what would happen if you would talk about redesigning the school calendar year among students, parents, teachers, community-based organizations to question the older adult school calendar plan that uses resources to review, reteach, and fix the summer learning loss that they had just planned for?
Thank you. And where are you from?
Yakima, Washington.
Woo-hoo.
I have been on local and state board for about 45 years, and a member, I represent the National Association for Year-Round Education here.
Perfect. So the question was, what would you do to restructure, redesign the schedule? And imagine if, I kept thinking, I was thinking the other night, wouldn't it be cool if school was voluntary and wasn't required? Would they come to your building? Oh, wouldn't that be interesting? But let's talk about a schedule. What are you doing to attract them versus they're required to show up?
I'm interested to hear what you're going to say.
I really don't know. I'm just going to be honest. For me, I actually homeschool. When I had my first daughter and she was 9 months old and she started walking, I knew then that the classroom was not going to be conducive because she was a scaler, and now she's designed to be a contortionist. So for me, I like natural learning, not forced. This is a very difficult question. So you have.
I mean,
Just don't want to make up things here, but I do recognize that learning happens when interest is captured. You know, and I think a lot of times when there's a lot of mandated things, I don't know how much learning is taking place during the academic year as well. You know, I think that there is something about when we are interested, learning is an automatic byproduct.
Yeah.
I agree, and I'm a fan of year-round school. I think that would be. Healthy. I think of athletes, I think of people who work out, people who train. You know, you do very intense workouts, right? If you're trying to get to a certain level, right? You put your time in, you go super hard, okay, then you take a break. Let your body recoup. Get your protein shakes, you know, you eat your stuff, right? Then you're back to it. And I think if we thought of education kind of in that way, instead of this kind of like, and then it's like, all right, okay. Now we all want to be out of school for the next 2 months because it's like this long, dragged out thing. So if we chopped it up and, you know, if there was a week here, a week there, a month there, and that was entangled with community partners and fun stuff and good stuff, and where kids can learn math by baking and cooking and learn through other different things, I mean, I think then you don't have the loss of learning. Mm-hmm. Why? Because there's the rejuvenation of teachers and of students and of the brain.
Yeah, so I'm hearing passion, fun, relevant, constant, continuous.
And then
I'm not hearing that schedule block.
And then we don't have to drag out, you know, U.S. history for 10 years. Just teach
How about you,
it and
Igor?
be done with it.
You any thoughts on?
I mean, we've been talking a lot about the difference between education and learning. Mm-hmm. So honestly, I don't know if I would want to be in school all year, but I'm always down to learn, and I think all young people are if provided with the opportunities, and if school was more interesting or structured differently, I think it would make sense to have it year-long. But then again, even if school isn't year-long, if we have access to other out-of-school learning or summer learning opportunities, then that time isn't just a waste of time.
Right.
So,
and it counts. Like, that should count. Like, you know, these programs, these after-school providers, like, that should count. You know, when you're an adult and let's say you want to go back to school and, you know, get a degree in whatever, there's certain programs where what will they do? They'll give you credit for the work you've done.
Right.
So why are our after-school programs during the day school, why are they not looked at as on par with education, learning, because these kids are learning stuff.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good point. In Rhode Island, there's a whole new course catalog for all high school youth that you can get courses for credit, dual enrollment college, but also career-related courses for credit for the after-school time space. And it's interesting to watch that new initiative come along because it's hard for, I think, the school-based adults to accept that it's valid learning out of school and accept that the out-of-school time players are the ones providing that work. But we're also involving teachers in that to sort of observe that practice and grade it so that they're learning that that's got potential. But it's a slow discovery process that's an acceptance that that's legitimate. But it's an interesting experiment that's occurring, and I'm curious if it's happening in other places. But you've put together, these are good recipes. Any other questions we've got out there? Here we go, over here.
Hello, my name is Luis, Central Washington, specifically from Yakima. I swear there's not that many people from Yakima, so that was really cool. So my question is, when organizations hear youth-led or youth works or whatever, they automatically think free labor, either physically or intellectual. So how do we change that thinking and balance and recognize, and instead of exploiting our youth in our communities?
That's a very good question.
Go ahead. Hikma's nodding. Go ahead.
I always say if you have, because a lot of times what happens, especially in Seattle, is we have these organizations that ask for youth voice and then ask young people to do research on whatever is happening with young people, what are young people interested in, what are some changes you want to make, let's make a list of things, let's do all this work. all this work that the organization is also doing, but paying other people to do. And I think it doesn't make sense to ask young people of their time and energy and not pay them the same amount you would pay somebody else that's doing the exact same work. And I think another reason why a lot of young people don't engage in this environment is because of that. Like there are a lot of young people who have to support their families, and they end up working somewhere else. Not that working somewhere else is a bad thing, but they end up doing things that they aren't necessarily passionate about or could lead to a greater good because they're asked to work for free, and there are no resources that are provided for them to create change and get paid for that.
You're absolutely right. If you're going to be part of a change process, you've got to be paid. I mean, you'll be pleased to know that my staff, and we pay our youth, who are youth leaders and advocates, for their advisory time and thinking about the change that we're asking them to get engaged with. We pay them to go to some of the meetings. And I'm a big advocate that that when high school, out-of-school time learning strategies start to be developed, that they really need to be linked to employment, and out-of-school time partners need to get together with the youth employment and the mayor's offices to think about young people, and particularly struggling financially, trying to help their families, we were having a big discussion last night with my team about financial literacy and youth who we are paying, struggling with the need to actually have their own accounts because their parents, they want to give the parents some of the money, but sometimes their parents are also taking the money that they're earning, and how do we teach them about financial literacy so they can be advocates for their families' financial needs as well as their own financial needs. But I do think that the high school space needs to be these things you were talking about, John, about, it's their time and they got to be paid for it, and it needs to be work-related and experiential. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Did you have any other thoughts about this question of?
I think you hit on it. I think one thing I'll add that we do just within our own program, in conjunction with the work in Tacoma, we ask kids to take surveys that are in our program. Yep. Most of you guys who receive grants, there's typically a survey attached to that. So, we pay our kids with gift cards when they take surveys, just a little token of like, hey, we understand this is a little bit of your time, we're extracting some information from you, like, here you go. So I think paying young people we all like money, we all like to get paid, and
time's money.
In this day and age,
and
you
if
got
you're an expert, pay for
everybody
it, right?
trying to be a YouTuber and a social media phenom, so, let's encourage them in positive stuff.
I do have to add, though, I feel like when we say we need to pay young people, I've heard people say, okay, let's do stipends. So it'll be like a 10-week program, you give $200. That's not paying young people. Because when you give, right? When you give that much money, you're telling me that my time is not as valuable as somebody else's. And one of the reasons why I was drawn to Opportunity Youth United was because the first thing they told us is like, we'll pay $20 an hour, which is really good pay. Compared to like what the minimum wage is in Seattle or in the greater Seattle area. That's how it started. They're like, we're paying you what we would pay anyone else doing this work. And I think that's an important thing to understand.
Yeah, and I think I would even advocate you think about youth teams doing action research being consultant teams and asking a consultant fee. If you know organizations are getting big grants, get your youth, your parent advocates too, to come in with a consultant fee to say, you can't make a good decision without our input, but we want to be paid as part of your consultancy because you got lines for professional consultants on that grant. Let's get paid for that. I know I'm a big advocate that should happen. I know that the youth organizations in our community, Youth in Action, Young Voices, and we have a group that's organized, a Providence Student Union, because the students feel as if there's teachers' unions, there should be student unions. They're advocating more and more that as being built into grants that they get paid as consultants. So I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Over here.
Good morning. Thank you so much. My name is Rebecca. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and I work with elementary school students. I, from a previous job, worked a long time with high school students, and they have built in through several more years of education ways in which they know how to talk about their own advocacy. Elementary school students, they express their advocacy by attention. So I'm really interested in seeing how you might advise organizations like mine that work with elementary school students. How do you encourage youth voice, both in kind of a feedback loop for that organization, as well as tying in that parent voice with the youth voice so that we can continue to be better? And thank you.
I was at Northgate Elementary School earlier this year because my organization puts together advocacy days for youth development and expanded learning opportunities in Olympia. And one of the, I think it was like a counselor reached out to us asking if she could bring a whole bunch of 4th and 5th graders to our advocacy day to talk to legislators. And so I went in to do like trainings for them on how to talk to their legislators. I think we had about 15 of those young people show up, 4th and 5th graders who were telling legislators why it's important to get funding for after-school programs. And I think I say that to show if we allow young people to have a say, they have something to say. And I feel like I guess going back to like the core of this work is relationship building and having that relationship with young people where they're like, yeah, this is, if I could change something at this school, it would be X, Y, and Z. And if we offer that opportunity, I feel like young people will always come through with opinions.
I'm very fortunate to be on the board of a school, the learning community, and it's a charter school, and I was a little hesitant to be on the board, except for the 2 women who founded it used to work for me. And they founded the charter on the fact that a charter should be a lab for public schools, and their entire mode of operation is training public school educators. So they talked me back into being on the board. The beauty of being involved in that school, and go Google learning community, their entire curriculum from 1st grade to 8th grade is a social justice curriculum. So the students are activists from 1st grade all the way to 8th grade, and they each year have community meetings where politicians, corporate leaders come in and hear the student presentations about same-sex bathrooms, dealing with homophobia, and it's all ages, and these youth are so powerful. And their parents are very involved in the school. There's a cafe for parents in the front hall, and the parents, many of them, it's mostly a lot of undocumented parents. So when ICE and the whole thing started with ICE coming out and hanging around the outside of the school, we activated 40 lawyers, and the parents are so engaged, the students are so engaged, that we actually had families whose children, where the parents are undocumented, filling out guardianship papers these are 40 families in case their parents were deported, and they would know that their children would be safe. Wow. But this level of activism and parent engagement and student social justice activism can occur in schools as well as out of schools, but it has to be super intentional. And leaders like you need to be involved in the shaping of schools, I think, and embedded in the curriculum strategy, so you're visiting all the time, not just periodically.
Yes.
Question here.
Yeah, hi. I know a lot of folks that are teachers, and a lot of them talk about how the school year is just so geared toward testing, just all throughout the year, and how much the kids are just totally judged on their test scores, and just how they lose a lot of creativity, the kids do, and the teachers do, from just having to focus so much on testing. So that's why I wanted to see what y'all thought about that.
I agree.
It's a stress factor, big time, right? Not healthy necessarily.
I went to Evergreen, so is the test the litmus test for what this person knows and understands about himself, herself, their interest, their passion? I was never a good math student, but now it's like I can do math like that. So the brain develops at different stages, and different things will come out at different stages in that person's life. And to just put the test and say, okay, you passed or failed, I think that really chips away at our confidence, and you begin to shut down. And so then, a shut down person can't perform that well on a test, could they? Probably not.
Trika, I know you've got thoughts on this. I can see it in your face. And
yes, I'm seeing
as a
this timer
homeschooling
here.
mom, ex-teacher.
I just want to co-sign what he said. That's really powerful, because if you have a test that is what's judging you, I don't know about you guys, but SATs, all the other stuff, I just really choose to forget those things. They were not a measure of who I was, who I am, and it's the same thing for our children. And that's why they have to know who they are, because any system, I have a friend, Linda, here, who said, no child should be parented by a system, be it school, be it the judicial system or anything, but they are who they are by design, and that needs to find some place of expression and celebration. And a test will never do that.
Yeah, we need to figure out how to get out of this trap, because I feel like it's stressing out teachers and schools, and it's spilling over into the out-of-school time space, where right now the out-of-school time players in places where tests are, the measurement, are being increasingly pressured. And I heard it in the question that came in here of where is it that we gotta address that test issue in the summer and in the out-of-school time space, rather than really think about what's the reframing of social emotional learning, the way we teach, where is the equity agenda cooked into the entire experience of learning all day, all year, and how do we change that? And I don't think we're going to be able to change it unless you three and all your colleagues across the country are at the table. I cannot thank you enough for your honesty and openness, and we didn't even know each other, but now we need to stay in touch and keep the movement going.
That's right.
Thank you very much for your questions and your participation this morning.
It wasn't. She had it.
We have one question that I didn't see. Go for it.
Now I feel like the evil person stopping people from leaving, but.
Part of the agenda.
Okay, so my question is for the young woman on stage. My name is Eileen Mokuria. I'm from Dallas, and I really loved how you talked about, this idea of youth-led being kind of a catch-all phrase that people enjoy using and not doing. And I'm thinking about my own experience when I was a teenager and having so much knowledge and power that I was learning about, and really the impasse and the walls were the adults that weren't ready to listen. I'm from Dallas, Texas, a often conservative place. And my wondering is, though, I think it's universal, how do you navigate that space when you're learning so much about you, what it means to be you, what it means to be from your community, yet you're in a world that's not ready to always listen and truly have an equitable conversation as you may have hoped would be possible?
I think, so for me, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like I was almost always the only young person in the room, and I felt like I was always I just felt very left out of conversations. And then when I was asked to bring other young people into that table, I'm like, this is not a space young people should be at, because it's so emotionally draining to be here. But then again, having even just one other young person at that table was so helpful, because having somebody understand what you're going through, having somebody, if you're the only person of color in the room and you're just sitting there staring at people make decisions that are affecting your life, and it just feels so off, and then you have one other person of color in the room, and you at least have that time right after the meeting to debrief and be like, "Bruh, that meeting was horrible," or even honestly, there have been times where we'd go to the bathroom, cry, and come back and be like, "Okay, we'll figure this out together." So I think always just having at least one or two other people who understand what you're going through, who will support you in every way, is at least what's getting me through. But
You're making me cry.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can't have her be alone.
Yeah.